Hello, welcome to another Cafe Imports education video. Today, I'll be talking about the relationship between taste and machine. The roasting machine is the tool that the roaster can use to control a coffee drinker's flavor experience. Let's get started. My favorite metaphor for green coffee is a beam of light. That beam of light holds within it the potential for every color that exists. However, it isn't until that light hits a prism that the colors are realized or available for us to see. Similarly, it isn't until that green coffee hits the roasting machine that we can see the potential flavors refract out of the coffee. As a beam of light passes through the prism, we see it bend and refract. Refraction spreads the spectrum of light into all sorts of different colors. At its source, the light looks almost entirely white. As it passes through the prism, that begins to change. We see it begin to split from white to colorful. The further from the prism the colors travel, the more they disperse, until finally the colors are lost to darkness. Now this is very similar to how coffee roasts. The closer a roast is to the green coffee, the more it will taste like, well, green coffee. As we roast it more, new and more flavors will come into being. And then as we go darker and darker, they fade away into blackness. In this case, totally burnt coffee. The roaster's job is not only to know when to stop the roast in order to keep the flavors intact, but also how to bend our prism, the roasting machine. You know, how we do when we adjust it just the right ways to refract the flavors of the coffee in the way that bends those flavors to our desired outcome. So most coffee tasters are looking for a balance of sweetness, acidity, body, and bitterness, as well as a complex bouquet of aromatic flavors. Those less complex 5 tastes we experience on our tongues are important to experience, especially in coffee. These are sweet, sour, savory, bitter, salty. However, most roasters work to highlight the sweetness and the acidity, which we taste through our sour receptors. In a coffee, these are far more pleasing to most specialty coffee drinkers. Even poor quality coffees possess bitter, salty, and savory compounds. It takes a special coffee, carefully roasted, to show sweetness and acidity, especially that a high quality coffee can possess. Beyond that, if the coffee has the acidity and sweetness to create these, it also has the basic ingredients to create hundreds or even thousands of more complex aromas that we can perceive as individual flavors. These are the compounds that cause a drinker to experience those special notes of things like floral, lemon, chocolate, cherry. All of these very specific flavors you can hear coffee tasters cite. This is truly why we call these coffees specialty. If we want to achieve these special qualities in a cup, we need to know what's happening to our coffee in the drum. There are 2 major reactions that are going on: the Maillard reaction and caramelization. Caramelization is the more straightforward of these 2. Simply put, it's the dehydration of sugars. A complex sugar molecule will begin to break down under heat, and the H2O or water segments within that larger polysaccharide molecule will begin to snap off. This at first creates more and more complex flavors and aromas until the sugar is so far gone that only the carbon framework of that molecule remains. Not only does this change the color of the sugars from white to black and all the tans and browns in between, but also from sweet to bitter. Now, many think that further caramelization leads to sweeter cups. This is not the case. More caramelization further breaks sweetness down into bitterness, and eventually a completely acrid cup of coffee. We know this from tasting sweeter light roasts and more bitter dark roasts. Now you know why. I personally like to work toward keeping the coffee's sweetness in place. Now the Maillard reaction is far more complex. We call it a reaction, but this is really an umbrella term for countless minute and momentary reactions that are all potentially going on simultaneously within the coffee seed. The ingredients for a Maillard reaction are heat, protein, and sugar. As the heat energizes the sugar and the protein, they begin to break down. These molecules create a bunch of smaller molecules. These molecules are more complex flavor particles, or those specific colors that we are speaking about from our light example. Some of these new molecules will be aromatic volatiles, creating whimsical aromas that will remind the coffee drinker of all kinds of interesting flavors. Others are heavier and will express themselves as creating a heavier body in the coffee, or perhaps more sweetness, more savory flavors, or more acidity. It really depends on the specific compounds. In other words, the coffee now tastes more complex than the original sugar or protein in the green coffee. It's also important to note that this reaction can start at much lower temperatures than strict caramelization. It's generally understood that this is the reaction taking place in earlier browning stages of the roast, and that is continuing in some form throughout the roast, kind of dovetailing in time with strict caramelization, which can simultaneously happen for a while, of course, until it becomes the primary reaction. Creating specific flavors in a coffee depend on so much. 1, the kinds of sugars and proteins that are present in the coffee to begin with. 2, how many of these the coffee has stored within that cell matrix. 3, the proximity to one another as they relate spatially within the seed. 4, the amount of heat the coffee is hit with and when during the roast. 5, the degree of heat present during every phase change. Okay, wow, that's a lot to keep track of. In fact, it's simply too much. If the reactions are so complicated that we have to boil them down, hundreds of them down, into just one name, they're certainly too complicated for us to pinpoint with any instrument as blunt as a coffee roasting machine. Simply put, more sugar and protein stored in the coffee will result in more flavor. The Maillard and caramelization reactions are browning reactions. This means that you can rest assured that if you are seeing the coffee change to brown, it's becoming more bountiful in flavors than it was when it was green. If the coffee is changing from brown to black, it's once again becoming less bountiful in flavor. Flavor develops and then is destroyed. Since these are reactions that abide by chemical and physical rules, if you roast the coffee the exact same way twice, hypothetically you should get results that are very, very similar, if not perceivably the same. The next job is to analyze the various roast profiles used in exploration and decide which roast was most like the final desired outcome. After this, a roaster needs to make choices of what to change on the next profiles to narrow the coffee into the desired final profile, or the final flavor expression. There are a lot of tools in the roaster's tool belt to do this. Here are some very generic guidelines that can help you troubleshoot the flavors in your roasts. A very long, slow roast will tend to homogenize flavors. It makes the coffee taste very boring. This can be done to a fault, which is a defect we call baking. A slow roast to a high temperature will lead to dull, bitter flavors. A slow roast to a lower temperature will lead to dull, chalky, sometimes toasted bread-like flavors. Conversely, a fast roast tends to maintain more of the green coffee flavor. A fast roast to a high temperature can show signs of scorching, small areas of char on the coffee, maybe even big areas, which will add a smoky, bitter flavor. A fast roast to a lower temperature can scorch as well, but may also show a very large spread and roast degree from the outer layers of the coffee to the inner layers of the coffee. This leads to grassy, grainy flavors, a sour flavor, and obviously a less repeatable outcome. Does this mean that you should not roast too fast or too slow? No way. How will you ever know what these defects taste like or where to begin or end your roast on your equipment if you don't explore? I recommend that you go for it. Don't let the fear of a defect keep you from exploring your coffee. Let the adventurous and curious spirit lead you to the outer realms of roasting. Find these defects with low-density coffees, with high-density coffees. Figure out where your equipment's limits are. Then taste the coffee. Taste it again. taste it again, until you can communicate something clearly about it that you feel satisfied with. And then taste it some more. Remember, you can't know what something tastes like until you taste it. If you live in fear of creating roast defects and you timidly stay within a small bandwidth of roasting, you may never be free to discover some truly unique and fascinating flavor experiences that your coffee may be holding within themselves. It's all locked up in there. Learning through this way will teach you so much about the coffees and about your machine. This will free you up to make so many more decisions in how to carve away your coffees and reveal the flavor profiles that most excite you within them. Every seed has a potential essence about it that lies inside waiting for discovery. As roasters, we chip away the coffee stuff that we don't want to taste and work to reveal what we do want to taste. If we carve away too much, we destroy the flavors we hope to show. If we carve away too little, we may never reveal those flavors in the first place. In our opinion, the essence of a coffee is what was established in that seed while it grew and while it was processed. The roaster who can unlock this essence and allow the coffee to speak for itself, showing all of its true colors, is someone who is truly honing their craft. Now go roast and taste and start making those connections between your machine and taste.